Nigeria enjoys, or is set to enjoy, nearly 3,000 hours of sunshine every year. With power grids unreliable, solar energy companies are providing solar energy to help hospices bring down their costs as they administer crucial treatment during this COVID-19 pandemic. Sheta.
Well, Rice correspondent Afolabi Akinrogunde, who visited a hospital in Lagos, which is powering up 2 isolation centers with solar energy, presented this report.
It is in lack of our reliable energy and quality healthcare. But one thing Nigeria has in abundance to target that scarcity is sunlight. In the thick of the fight against the spread of the COVID-19 virus, energy bills are taking a huge chunk out of hospital budgets. That's why energy companies like Oxano are providing solar-powered alternatives for healthcare facilities on the front lines of the pandemic. Well, we've come to the National Orthopaedic Hospital in the Igbobi area of Lagos. We've come to this specific part of the hospital to take a closer look at the solar panels upon the roof there. Not only are we going to look at the solar panels, we're also going to see the room in which the energy transmitted from those panels is transferred to, so we can get a better understanding of how this all works. Let's take a look. There are 45 Oxano solar panels on the roof, 30 on one side and 15 on the other. They've been generating electricity to power 2 COVID-19 isolation centres on the grounds of the hospital. The $100,000 project has been sponsored by All On Partnerships for Energy Access, who insist this is an opportunity for everyone to see how cost-effective solar energy is.
A project of this sort basically would cost anything between 35 and 40 million naira. Of course, you could say this is a lot of cost. But the most important thing really is the long-term benefit. The chicken and egg situation with solar energy in Nigeria, or generally, is that it's a high capex, low opex, almost no opex scenario. So basically, you have to spend a lot of capex up front, but then for years and years after, you almost have to spend nothing, as opposed to spending a quarter or a fifth of that, and then spending eventually ×2 of what you would have spent on solar. So it's really the challenge most industries have, i.e. they know it makes sense. However, to put that capital in place at the beginning to enable them invest in it really is a challenge. So part of our view here is more or less to also help bridge that gap, that financing gap, especially for companies which operate in this space.
Oxano have been able to benefit from that funding. Theirs is Nigeria's first solar panel assembly factory, and with this project, they're aiming for the facilities to run on solar power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
They get direct current coming from the sun, so the solar panels transmit it down. So this is an inverter, this is a hybrid inverter. It's a combination of, you can take in solar power and then this in grid power. So the inverter converts the direct current coming from the solar panels into alternating distant current. Alternating current is what the typical appliances in the house can use, So what happens is, when it comes, the first priority for the inverter is to power the loads that are on. So right now, it's going to power the ACs, the lights, the fans, and other distant appliances that are on. Now, the excess is now what it uses to charge the batteries. So the batteries are more like a storage distant bank for maybe when there are not sufficient solar array coming from the sun, or at night, because at night is more like an inverter system. So at night, it draws from what it has stored in the battery bank.
Chuk says, despite the tragedies, the COVID-19 pandemic could also leave triumphs in its wake.
For the first time, everybody has to use the health facilities available in Nigeria. Unlike before when you can easily jet out of the country. So now what I know that will happen going forward is that everyone in position of authority will begin to see that he ensures that the facilities there are up to the standard that he can use for himself. So now it's not just that he's doing it for other people, but now he's doing it for himself, his children, and the whole citizens. So I believe that going forward, the health institutions, will get proper attention, better funding from government, and also you also notice the involvement of private sector players, the corporate, this industry. I know that will also continue even after this COVID-19 period.
Looking ahead to that light at the end of the tunnel, many hope solar energy will lead the way. And with buckets of sunshine to offer, Nigeria's future is bright. Afolabi Akinrogunde, Rise News, Lagos.
Right, joining us now is Afolabi Akinrogunde, anyway, without the mask, the investment manager of All-On Partnerships for Energy Access. He'll be speaking to us on COVID-19 solar power installation in isolation centers. It's a joy having you. I mean, you were very apt in that little documentary we watched there. Anyway, you had the mask on then, when you talked about the fact that it is all CAPEX, none or little or no OPEX at all. I mean, can you talk me through that and also talk me through the criteria that warranted these grants at which you used in deploying to these isolation centers?
Okay, thank you very much. I think first thing more or less is I work for a company called All-On Partnerships for Energy Access, which is an impact investment company with focus on the off-grid energy sector, which is mostly renewable energy. And while we looked at while we used the COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity to actually roll out renewable energy in Nigeria in these facilities, is primarily because of the need for us to see solar which is a much more reliable form of energy in action in Nigeria. We see that once you have diesel power, you have to look for your diesel supplier. You don't have money. You're looking at where you will get you get bad diesel sometimes. But once you have solar power, you look for that money, you set it up, and then for years and years and years afterwards, you don't need to put it up. You don't need to pay the operating costs associated with rolling it out. And then in terms of why we started out this initiative, more or less, we have in our portfolio about 21 different companies which operate in the solar space, in the solar and renewable energy space, and we picked out 4 of these companies, basically Lumos Energy, Oxano, and one other, and then we will work with these companies, basically knowing their capacity to roll out solar installations in 6 different. Yes, to roll out solar installations in 5 different states in Nigeria, and also rolling out solar power supply in mini grids to pharmacies and also other healthcare centers within areas where the mini grids, solar powered mini grids, where we have interest in also operating. So as of today, we've rolled out about 26 states in Nigeria. And have impacted healthcare delivery to tens of thousands of Nigerians. As of the moment, we've spent about 90 million naira in Nigerian in naira funding to support this initiative. And there's also another 90 million naira which is available in low cost, in low interest facilities to enable further solar rollout for health centers within Nigeria.
Indeed. So you've done 26 states already. I'm wondering if you plan to do the entire spread of the country, and when would that be done? But let me ask you specifically, because from my understanding, solar manufacturing is concentrated in China. And with the disruptions we've had in logistics and supply chain, how much of an impact has that had in putting all of this together in terms of parts, in terms of skills? Do we have that at the moment in Nigeria? Are we able to ramp that up?
Okay, thank you very much. I think one of the things that's important about what we do at All-On is, I think your story mentioned Oxano. Oxano Limited is is currently the only solar panel assembler in Nigeria. So the advantage it has is that it can deploy solar, it can roll out these panels within Nigeria without us having to import a lot of them from China, even though a lot of the parts come, but because they come in bulk, they can actually roll out a lot faster. And I think one of the advantages we may have had, you could call that an advantage, is also the fact that China was more or less the epicenter of this COVID-19 challenge, and it has overcome its challenges right now. So I think Nigeria today is where China was in January or thereabouts in terms of the COVID-19 challenge. So pretty much the factories have opened, the assembly lines have opened, the manufacture lines have opened. And also Nigeria also has a lot of thousands of people who, the renewable energy sector in Nigeria is more than 10 years old. The MD of Oxano, Chooks, that you saw in that report, has spent well up about 13 years in the solar industry. So you have people who have the capacity, people who have the experience, people. I think the only thing really we need is more or less government support and also financing, which is a gap we are also trying to.
Mr. Afolabi, do hold on your thoughts. I know you want to respond to the rest of my questions, but we'll have to go on a break and be right back to talk some more. Join us again. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. We still have Mr. Afolabi Akinrogunde. He's the investment manager of All On Partnerships for Energy Access, and it is a not-for-profit establishment to act as a catalyst in the growth of Nigeria's market for sustainable off-grid energy solutions. Thank you so much for staying with us, Mr. Afolabi. And you had mentioned that currently you are now spread to 26 states to power or to enable off-grid installations in isolation centers across the country. And I was asking you, do you plan to scale that up to the entire state and the Federal Capital Territory?
Currently, the remit we have right now is for the initial rollout, which we've done. There is, however, the possibility for the second arm of really the solar relief fund we have out is about 180 million naira. The 90 million naira grant has been fully utilized. There is another 90 million naira grant which is available to the investees, which I mentioned earlier, to use to roll out commercially viable solar solutions for healthcare facilities. However, what is also important for me to also note is that a lot of the work we've done has also been taken up by a lot of other positive agencies across Nigeria and and even across the African continent. We've had calls coming in from other entities, which I will not name, but we are seeing out a lot of other entities taking up this COVID solar initiative and rolling out. For example, we have proposals that have been announced for them to roll out 200 million naira, 300 million naira. So actually, a lot of entities are also taking a cue for what we've done. So more or less, the leadership role we have played here has actually activated probably about ×5 or ×6 the initial funding we have put in place as a company.
Okay, let's speak about the future of renewable energy. I mean, you have mentioned it, and Nigeria definitely has the economic strength and the environmental factors to push this sector forward. So my question to you is, what do you see as the future of renewable energy in Nigeria? And also, you had mentioned among the 21 companies that were working with you, Lumos, had earlier in the year gotten a 75 million naira fund to provide electricity to 1 million households in Nigeria over the next 5 years. Where are they with that plan as we speak? Okay,
I think I would start with the first question. Well, in terms of the industry, there are a lot of things that can be done to enable. As of now, we've got probably millions of Nigerians who in the low millions who are using solar energy, from your rechargeable lamps to your rechargeable lanterns, to actually 1 kilowatt solar solutions, to the kind of solutions that can actually power the facility I am in right now. So in terms of that, we've got millions of people who are using solar today. What we hope to do is to be able to double, triple, or quadruple that number within the next 5-6 years. And what is really needed from all stakeholders, most important of which is the government, is actually the fiscal support to enable solar actually get the right of place it deserves within the power space. If you can have, for example, reductions in import levies for solar products within Nigeria, if you can see support further tax holidays, for example, for solar assembly plants for companies which want to set up solar recycling, battery recycling plants, or even battery manufacturing plants, all of this will help to reduce the capex of setting up solar infrastructures within Nigeria. And of course, those cost savings can then translate into reducing the price which you and I will pay in the market for setting up solar, because actually the cost, yes, even though if you run the economics today, it makes sense over a 5 or 6 year time horizon. But the thing is that the average Nigerian wants to survive today. And so we need to find a way to make solar attractive in such a way that they can actually use it today to benefit them and enable them work well. And then in terms Lumos. Lumos is a company which we are also invested in. We are a shareholder in Lumos, and Lumos, as of today, is the largest solar home system company in Nigeria.
Okay.
All right.
Really, I think that there's a glitch there. We'll fix that.
There,
but
yeah.
he was talking about responses so far to solar energy. As the world moves to cleaner energy, we cannot afford to be left behind.
Many valid points he's talked about. Take for instance, Lumos. Look at the partnership Lumos had with MTN in such a way that you can just recharge your phone and use that same credit to be able to harness electricity. It's unparalleled. A lot of small businesses. I went to a guy called a barber shop the other day. He was using Lumos, small businesses. They've been able to power homes and do a lot. There are many other companies that I will be asking him about under All-On, companies like Energy and the likes, that are in the vanguard of providing power to communities. Look at the isolations of that. So it is time we really start to have this conversation, because what we produce currently cannot help the grid. And guess what? We're paying × of that in diesel generators.
So it's cost effective to have.
It's cost effective
in the long run.
Yes.
It's cost effective. I mean, immediately it might be very difficult to deploy.
Of course.
It might not be as easy as we think it is. The cash flow and the likes. But when you even look at it, the federal government has been trying as much as possible to be able to cut down the price of solar panels and things like that, and even encourage local production. All right, so these are the things we should look into and get more people in the business.
I mean, you did give the example of MTN, and I remember when they were running in that promotion for Lumos as well, it did seem as if it was going to gain traction, but for some reason...
It gained traction.
It gained traction, but right now, there are not a lot of people using it. But then let's go back to Mr. Afolabi Akinrogunde. You were answering that question before we got disconnected.
Okay, I think probably in addition to further add to what you mentioned, is the challenges we have in Nigeria. The Nigerian space is very, very different. I tell many of my colleagues in this space who come in from other countries like Kenya or Uganda that many of the things that operated for them in Kenya or Uganda don't operate here, for example. In Kenya, for example, you have a very, very robust mobile money infrastructure that makes it very, very easy for you to pay, to get things done and all of that. And it has speculated to the very, very lowest streams of the economy. In Nigeria, we're still struggling to get the acceptance for the mobile money infrastructure here. So it continues to make it challenging to get a lot of people onto it. You need to have people be able to pay from their phones, get charged from their phones and all of that. So those are some of the challenges which we'll see. However, it is still very, very clear that probably we've had at least well over 500,000 additional connections over the last year. And I think with the support of the government, with the support with the putting in place of the infrastructure, and I think also realizing that energy is a national security matter. If you cannot produce your food, you cannot take care of your people, and you cannot provide security, then you have issues. So I think we need to start realizing energy to be a national security matter, and to ensure that that government alone cannot solve the problem, but government can ease the problems and help the private sector to actually solve a lot of these problems. And the way they can do that is by enabling, for example, mobile money percolation within the economy, and also creating the enabling environment via fiscal support for the renewable energy industry to actually grow.
Very apt what you're saying. Because when you look at the antecedents of companies like M-Copper in Kenya, is because of the mobile money penetration. They've been able to go one step further. But let me ask you this. Let me put you on the spot. I'm having like a cheeky Cheshire grin when I say this. When are you guys going to deploy at our Disney Dome Isolation Center? We are waiting for that. I mean, it has to get over to us. That's just by the way. But two critical questions I want to ask you. Number one, you talked about no operating costs in the end. But talk me through that. A lot of people will say, in effect, there are operating costs. When it comes to solar in the long run, that you get a battery wrong, then there's a big problem to that. I also understand that the federal government have been doing lots of work as regards, reducing the price at which you get solar panels into the country. What has been on as regards that? Has that policy been favorable or otherwise? And I also want to ask, all of this you've deployed now, have you used the All-On partner companies like Energy and the likes and some other companies in deployment of this project and some other projects you've used? Just those three insights.
Okay, last question first. All these deployments were made by All-On investee companies, so Energy, Lumos, Oxano, all of them basically deployed all of these solutions. And then in terms of government support via government support for the solar panel assembly business, it is something which the government has started. I think companies like Oxano have keyed into that policy. However, speaking a lot broadly, one thing we need to do as a country is to actually sit back and then coordinate where are we as a country, how are our policies working for or against each other in this economy. So, for example, I mentioned earlier about custom waivers in terms of importing solar inputs into Nigeria. If you continue to have the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Power, NERC, Rural Electrification Agency, all doing their own bit. But then you have other government agencies whose role it is to make money for the government, and they say, oh, come, even though, yes, you have this policy, I'm still going to slap a waiver, I'm still going to slap import duties onto you because of XYZ reason. I have a target to meet. So I think we need to sit down in the country and actually sit back and then say, okay, we need to coordinate all of these agencies, ensure that what one agency is doing at one bit is not being hampered by the work of another. And all of them are doing very, very well. However, we need to add a little bit more coordination to it. So and also in terms of your question concerning this day doom, I think I will have a discussion with a few of our investees and see what their appetite is in terms of that, and also probably maybe even meet one or two other agencies and see if they can look at that. I think I have one or two in Abuja. They'll take a look at it.
Interesting way to see. Different initiatives and programs to fix the energy sector in Nigeria are more or less unsuccessful, and you've highlighted some of these issues. And I'm glad you talked about fiscal support from government, waivers, local manufacturing, because just last week, presidential spokesperson Femi Adesina released a communique on what the government is doing and will do to respond to COVID-19. And one of it was that, in his words, large-scale installation of residential solar systems using mainly local materials. I wonder what your thoughts are on this. How feasible is it? And where do you see the bottlenecks arising from? But you will respond to that question after this break. So let's go on that break. We'll be back to talk some more. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Rise News. Afolabi Akinrogunde is still with us, investment manager of All On Partnerships for Energy Access. Thank you so much for staying with us. My question before that break, just for our viewers who may have just joined us, let me quickly sum it up, is the fact that government is planning to install solar off-grid systems in residential places post-COVID-19. And I was asking you, how feasible is this, considering that most interventions we have to fix our energy sector, has been unsuccessful, largely. Do you think this is possible?
Thank you. I think the devil is in the details. We need to see where exactly the details of this plan. We need to know which government agency is going to be rolling it out. Will it be done through the excuse me, through the CBN or through the Rural Electrification Agency? Sorry, excuse me. Through the Rural Electrification Agency, which has done a fantastic job over the last 4 or 5 years in this space, or through the Bank of Industry. So we need to really find out what modus operandi is it going to be. Is it going to be done through one government agency which then rolls it out directly, or will it be done through a government financing institution which then works with the private sector to actually roll it out? And then we also need to find out more or less in terms of the workability of it. Will it be done? Will it be free, in quotes, or will there be some form of financing model involved in it? So I think a lot more detail needs to be put on the table for the industry to study and probably make inputs into, and then probably arrive at what might be the most workable model for it being worked out. But I think on the whole, it is a good idea. It's a fantastic idea. One good thing that may come out of it may actually be that it may help to actually make solar a lot more visible, a lot more attractive to the average person. After which the pent-up demand can can then be activated. But I think we need to look at the details.
Definitely. The devil is in the details, especially with about 55% of the country's 200 million inhabitants that have no access to grid-connected electricity. And even those that do have access to centralized power are usually cut short by, power shortages and whatnot. So my question to you now is the pressing need for energy reforms. I know you have mentioned it, but if you could bring something to the table, what would it be? What are those bottlenecks? What is stopping us from embracing solar energy as a whole?
Well, I think you've asked two questions. One question is going to be what needs to be done to solve the power crisis in Nigeria. That is one. And then the second is going to be how does solar energy fit into that as a key part. In terms of solving the power crisis in Nigeria, solving the issues we have on the grid, I think just to simplify, there are two things. Number one, you've got to put in place cost-reflective tariffs, i.e., as of today, it's costing less. Power companies are getting less than what it costs them to actually generate, transmit, and distribute power. So it's a business that is doomed to fail. I wouldn't touch that business with a long football. Then, secondly, you also need to find a way to ensure that the rules of the road are enforced. Right now, we see a lot of time because of political considerations. Elements like MITO are not being enforced as at when due, and all the changes that need to be done. People that break the rules are not being punished as at when they should be punished. So I think to make it very, very simple, once you put in place those two things, those two elements, ensure that the rules of the road are being enforced. We have a lot of laws in Nigeria. We have a lot of policies. The key problem is actually implementing and enforcing those policies. And then you ensure that people who are producing, transmitting and generating and distributing power in Nigeria don't do it at a loss. Those two solutions will probably. Now, those are simple, but in terms of the real world, actually making it happen is a different matter entirely. And then onto solar. I think one key thing is there's been a lot of improvement over the last 3 years in terms of government participation and support for the solar industry. We've had, for example, the intergrid, the interconnected mini grid policies, which was rolled out by the NERC, the National Electricity Regulation Commission, last year or thereabouts, which has more or less set out the rules of engagement between mini grids, which are private entities, and the discos, because, of course, at the point in time, you may find out that the two of them may actually clash. In terms of the mini grid setting up in the community and the disco coming and meeting that mini grid, how do they interact? How do they share resources? How do they both get a piece of the pie? So I think those policies are good policies which need to be encouraged, but which also need to be managed on a regular basis, not a light touch, but careful touch to ensure that the commercial realities are fully managed. So I think on the whole, the key thing at the end of the day is actually sitting down and managing the policies we have in place, having the discipline as a country to actually enforce the rules which we have in place for this sector.
Right, I've got two quick insights I want you to talk me through. Let's talk about investments, in the solar power sector. A lot of people in the investment circle don't want to touch it because, one, they don't understand it. Two, they just treat it like it's an investment with a long pole because it would not yield as quickly as possible. Is there a possibility of doing something that was done for agriculture, for instance, to the solar industry? Because prior to this time, before Lamido Sanusi came in, nobody wanted to invest in agriculture that much until, some securities were put in place. Is there a possibility of doing that? And secondly, I want you to talk me through the All-On journey. It's quite amazing that All-On, this is Shell's own renewable energy, expression. And that's amazing. Shell, an energy company, a fossil fuel company, thinking about renewable energy. So talk me through that journey and talk me through about the investment possibility in this.
Okay, thank you. I think the key thing more or less about the renewable energy sector as an attractive point is primarily because as I've mentioned earlier, it is a high capex investment, and a lot of people do not have that initial capex to put in place to actually make it work. But I think you have to split the sector into two, more or less. You need to look at what I might call the attractive end of the market, the people like you and I who can afford to put solar in our homes, and the commercial and industrial segments of the market. And then you then have to look at the mass market, the people on the road, your average man who earns 30, 40, 50K a month. You also have to look at how do you then enable solar become attractive to people on that area. That is where you see a lot of need by the government to actually work as government policy to enable people to make it attractive for people to get into that space. Now, in terms of the middle class and the commercial and industrial segment of the market, it's very, very investment ready. It is easy to do. It is attractive. There are companies putting in millions of dollars today into that space, and they're making money. If I go into a bank today and I tell them that I can power your branch and your ATMs for 70% of what it was costing you using generators, and I put those numbers in front of you and I guarantee it, and you sign on to it for like a year, and this is basically power as a service. You're not even paying for anything, and you see that, yes, actually after 6 months you're saving money as an entity. So there are various models which have been put in place in this sector to actually make it attractive for people. But there's actually people who can sit down, calculate, okay, I can make this money, I can invest this upfront, either directly as capital, or I can do power as a service, and I can say, okay, even though I'm paying, for example, 1 million a month, I can pay 700K, 600,000 naira a month instead. This makes sense to me. But we then come to the lower end, which is where the bulk of Nigerians, we've got well over 100 million Nigerians in this space. And we have to find ways to bring them into that group. And these are the things which will also help the industry as a whole also scale. And this is where, for example, you say government has to have a policy to actually encourage the industry, whether it is going to be directly, whether it is going to be a combination of the direct financing and even fiscal support to enable this industry grow. For example, import duties alone add 20, 25, 30%, depending on what you're bringing into the cost of solar. If you remove that, solar is going to become 20, 25% cheaper in Nigeria. That's fantastic. If you give solar companies tax rebates, 10-year holidays or whatever, you find out that they can also then transfer that and use that, because solar also is a long-term business. They have that long-term support now to enable them scale and make impact. So I think it's solar is attractive. We have invested in the two parts of the scale, as I've mentioned earlier. Olon, again, back to the Olon story, is an impact investment company. As you've said, it is seeded by Shell. About 99% of our financing comes from Shell. Shell, as you know, is one of the biggest energy companies in the world, oil and gas energy companies in the world, transiting right now to become an energy company as a whole, with investments in power, in renewables, in mobility, and of course, the traditional oil and gas. So Shell more or less realized the need for it to also see, as the energy transition is unfolding in other parts of the world, to enable that transition also commence in Nigeria, which was why it set up Olon. Right now, we've got investments in about 22, 23 different companies. We hope to raise that number to about 30 companies before the end of this year.
Thank you so much, Mr. Afolabi, for coming on the show and sharing this insights with us.